It seems the old ways still hold some power.
Come at me!
Path of Exile 2 is basically our next generation action RPG. And one of the things we really wanted to make sure that we were doing with it is to make the action combat really, really excellent. We just want to make sure that anyone playing the game, you can play it like an action game, feels fun to play. We've added things like dodge rolls and like hack cancelling, things like this. And it just means that the game just feels a lot better than it previously did, as well as everything else that you'd expect from a sequel to Path of Exile.
One thing in particular that sets Path of Exile apart is obviously the depth, but in the itemization systems, crafting systems, but also the sheer number of quantity of monsters, encounters. Like, we have over a decade of content that is going to be available in Path of Exile 2 as well.
For Path of Exile 2, we really want to keep the mechanics from Path of Exile 1 that are great, but we can now have the opportunity to rebuild them or restructure them in a way that is easier to understand and much more accessible for someone coming at it for the first time, and keep that depth there, either hidden away or much more natural to understand.
I think there's a big difference between depth and complexity. Path of Exile 2 in some ways is less complicated than Path of Exile 1 because we've simplified the sort of technical complexity around doing things like the way you socket skills and things like that to make it easier to understand. But at the same time, we're making sure that we keep all the depth in terms of character options and things that you can do. So everything is still there as far as like, what can I do to build my character? It's just that it is easier to do so because you don't have to be worrying, for example, about when you're changing your items that you're going to break the way your skills are working and things like that. So I think that actually new and regular players can tolerate a lot of depth. It's the complexity that we want to try and avoid. The dodge roll actually came about because we really wanted to be able to find a way to having some skills that took longer to do than other skills. But the problem with that is that skills feel really terrible if you start them and then you can't get out of them. So we really needed a way to make that interruption be possible, and the dodge roll was a really great way to do it. We actually already had a philosophy for Path of Exile 2 boss design where we wanted to make sure that everything was dodgeable. But previously we were just doing that by running around. But I think the dodge roll has actually changed a lot of things, and especially because, now that you can expect a player to be able to do that, it means that we can have the expectation and the balance as well.
We've done fresh design on everything. We've taken some elements from PoE1 in terms of monsters, specific monsters, and brought them over and kind of, because they were fun to play. Like, why not replicate something that is still fun to play? But of course, it's full fresh coat of paint. There are definitely new systems. I'd say a lot of the monsters are faster, for example, which is where dodge roll helps to come into play. We have secondary AI systems that allow the monsters to do skills while they were performing another skill. Much like how a player can dodge roll to interrupt a skill, a monster can now do the same thing. We have a lot more monsters doing interactions with the environment. They'll interact with the world more, a lot more spawning from things, a lot more, like in one of our areas, the Isle of Kin, we have monsters riding on top of another monster, and then when they get close, they all jump off.
There's a lot of design changes that have had to gone on to take into account the way that the new skill system works. So with something like the Mercenary now, we're developing how crossbows should work. We kind of really looked at that and thought, okay, how can we make crossbows just feel completely different than bows? If you look at a shooter, it's like pistols and shotguns and things like that. Like, what about those makes them different from each other? And so therefore, it makes the whole experience just feel so different than what a bow feels like now. You want that, like, pull the trigger and it instantly fires, that kind of instant response type of thing. And I think that as we approach each different character class, we're thinking, like, how can we make the skills here feel so different than every other class?
For a lot of the really unique skill sets like the crossbows, which are almost basically guns, there's a lot of work that's been done in other games to make those feel great that we had the opportunity to bring into Path of Exile, and there's a lot of lessons of what works well in a shooter that can work well in an ARPG if you do the work, get the animations right, get the timing right. We've done a lot of core system changes to make it so that it feels like you've got as much control as you would in a shooter-focused game. There's a lot of what have other games done well that we can bring into Path of Exile that no ARPG is really built on. because they don't have the crazy level of skill variety that we've ended up having.
So we've got a live stream later today where we're going to be showing off 2 of our character classes. We're really deep diving into the mechanics, and we're really excited to show that. So if you're interested to know more about Path of Exile 2, then tune into that later today.
The old magics, not to be feared.